Hey there, Nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Chiefskate, and welcome to the episode of Way of the Underhive. This series is dedicated to helping brand new players to Necromunda build their starting rosters and learn more about the game mechanics of their favorite gang. And on today's episode, we will discuss playing a House Delaque Outcast gang. We will discuss their strengths and weaknesses, as well as their fighters, their playstyle, and provide you with 3 1,400 point starting rosters to begin your very first campaign of Necromunda Ash Wastes. So with that being said, let's get this video on a roll. So first of all, let's talk about the strengths of playing a House Outcast gang. First of all, Outcast gangs have cheaper leaders, champions, and fighters than normal House gangs. Alright, especially when it comes to leaders, you actually have 4 different stat lines you can actually choose to make your leaders, so they're very, very versatile. Or you could actually substitute that leader character with a Dramatis Personae leader and from that specific house. So for example, let's say you want to have a house agent to lead your gang, you can possibly do that because all you gotta do is take that stats, pay for the cost, and use that to lead your Outcast game, which allows you to make some really, really cool options and a lot of different types of gangs and add a lot of variety to the gangs that can be fielded in a campaign of Necromunda. At the same time, you also have access to all the same weapons, war gear, brutes, hanger-ons, upgrades, all the different kind of game mechanics that you can purchase for a gang. You can also put that for your Outcast gang as well because it's also readily available. Because as a House Outcast gang, you have access to those house gear. At the same time, you also gain access to the starting gear that comes with the Outcast gang. So for example, if you want to use a chain sword, for example, and normally your house gang can't have that, well, you can use it because now it's available to your Outcast list, which is kind of nice as well. At the same time, your champions and your leaders also have no weapon and equipment restrictions from the house list either, which is also really nice too. So for example, if you have a fighter with specific gear that can be taken by the entire gang, so for example, if you have a prospect level character who's the only character that can take that type of weapon for a house gang, well, in an Outcast gang, it's free reign. That weapon can go to any fighter that you want, which is really, really awesome as well. So because of that, you can make some really powerful exploits as well as some very powerful combinations for your Outcast gangs. Now, with all the strengths involved of playing an Outcast gang, there are some notable weaknesses, and let's go ahead and talk about that next. Alright, so let's talk about the obvious weakness of playing an Outcast gang. Outcast champions and Outcast scum have pretty mediocre stats compared to their house-specific counterparts, okay? So they're especially their psychology stats, like their leadership, cool, willpower, same thing with intelligence, they're kind of mediocre at best. The same thing with their combat stats as well. So they will not be as good as house-specific champions and house-specific scum. At the same time, you don't have access to the same type of skills or some special abilities and some unique game mechanics of the normal house lists, alright? So for example, if there's a very unique kind of skill that's specific to a house, you won't be able to access that because your Outcast scum only have access to cunning, for example, as their primary skill, and your champions can only take archetype specific skills, so you can't, get those other skills from that. So that part is kind of sad as well. At the same time, you also have some fierce restrictions on your alliances as an Outcast gang. If you're a House Outcast gang, you can only take house-specific alliances only. So whatever alliances, strong alliances that a noble house takes, those are the only alliances you can make. So if you're really big on the whole alliance game system, just be aware that your alliances will be severely limited if you play a House Outcast game. And as always, when it comes to Outcast games specifically, you'll need to beware the wrath of the balance bandwagon. Unfortunately, the balance bandwagon will always find some way to scream and cry overpowered and balance and cry salty, bitter tears of why they're losing their games. So just be aware that every single time you play an Outcast gang, you will have to deal with the balance bandwagon of some sort, and they're always lurking about, hiding in the shadows, ready to spring upon you. So just be prepared to deal with that level of immaturity and just learn to move on beyond it. So, because the balance bandwagon is a legitimate thing you gotta worry about. So now that we're done talking about the strengths and weaknesses of playing a house gang, Outcast gang, let's go ahead and talk about specifically about this house and the kind of benefits you could expect from it in your Outcast gang. Alright, so now that we're done talking about the strengths and weaknesses of playing a House Outcast gang, let's talk about House Delaque Outcast gang specifically. So before you even start, ask yourself a couple of questions. Do you want all of your fighters to have psychic abilities? If you want that power, play Delaque Outcast gang. Do you want to have access to powerful Delaque close combat weaponry but want better close combat fighters? If you answer yes to that question, play a House Delaque Outcast gang. Is shooting cool to you but stealth a non-starter? Do you want to be sinister and make your friends and enemies fear the darkness? If you answered yes to all these questions above, then playing an Outcast gang from House Delaque is the gang from you. And the reason why is because you'll have access to everything awesome that makes a House Delaque gang pretty cool. At the same time, able to do so with fighters who cost significantly less credits in order to do so as well. So with that being said, let's go and talk about some of the potential issues of playing a House Delaque Outcast gang. Alright, so the primary issue that you might run into with playing a House Delaque gang is the Psychoteric Whispers. Now, for those of you guys who are unaware, House Delaque gangs can increase some of their fighters and upgrade them by paying 30 credits to make them have Psychoteric Whispers. Psychoteric Whispers actually makes your fighters into unsanctioned Psykers and also gives them abilities, psychic abilities as well. Now, in this case, because you're an Outcast gang, if you do this, you could of course pay additional 30 credits for your fighter to determine the Psykers, and then they can start using psychic disciplines. Now, when it comes to Psychoteric Whispers, some players say yes, you can do this, while some people say that you can't. So let's talk about the yes argument. The yes argument is basically this: it's an upgrade, and just like anything else with an Outcast gang, you can purchase weapons, equipment, upgrades, hang-arounds, boots, and House Outcast for anything of those things that you can usually get from a normal House and a House Outcast gang. So because of that, since that's an upgrade that you can purchase for your fighters, you should be able to do exactly the same thing for your fighters as well. Now, of course, there's the argument, and the only reason why there's a no argument is because it's not fair. That's the only argument that most people would say in an Outcast game. That's not fair that you can do that for your fighters. I mean, it's part of the whole balance bandwagon argument is what they'll basically say. Now, of course, I'm just joking about that part, but it could be argued, of course, that since your Delaque gang is an Outcast gang, there's a reason why they're outcasts, and one of those reasons might be because, you know, maybe they can't listen to the whispers of the darkness and get psychic abilities. Whatever the case may be, though, of course, I always suggest that you always take this up with your arbitrator for your campaign, and the reason why is because your arbitrator does run that campaign, and your arbitrator should make a decision on this, and whatever your arbitrator decides is their final decision on that issue. For me, however, that wouldn't be such an issue for me because I always default on the rule of cool, and having an entire gang that can have psychic abilities, in my opinion, just sounds really awesome. But then again, that's me. That may not be your arbitrator, so bring it up to them to figure out if they'll allow it in their campaign or not. And since we are talking about Psychoteric Whispers, let's talk about the potential exploits that you can use in a House Delaque Outcast gang. In this case, I like to call it the Psychoteric hive mind build, and this is pretty much how it works. What you want to do is you want to pick a leader who has an excellent willpower stat line. And the reason why is because the better the willpower stat lines, the more often you'll be able to trigger your psychic ability for your gang. Now, once you have your leader picked out with the ideal willpower that you want, usually anywhere between willpower 4 to 6 would be perfect for this. Give them the Telepathy discipline. Now, the reason why you want to give them the Telepathy discipline is because of the psychic power Unbreakable Will. What Unbreakable Will does, it allows your leader to be able to give fighters the 9 inches of them their willpower stats as well as their cool stats. Now, the cool stats are nice, and you know that's very helpful, no doubt, but the willpower stat even more so, because that means is that if you have any other fighters who have psychic abilities as well, they could use your leader's lower willpower stat to get those powers to trigger and even more often, and also make your gang more powerful as well, which means that your psychic capable fighters can substitute their own willpower stats for the leader, triggering their abilities easier, and then of course this can cause a cascading effect, rippling through all of your fighters, linking together into a singular quote-unquote hive mind. So because of that, your leaders become very, very powerful. Now, this could be potentially devastating for enemies depending on what kind of psychic abilities you use and the builds that you have for your gang. The only weakness in this hive mind build, of course, that you have to protect your leader, because your leader is the only one who's able to use this ability to give the better willpower stats to your fighters. So protect your leader at all costs. And so because of that, I like to think of Delaque guys being linked together like a hive mind. That way they can use their psychic powers and be extremely devastating. So now that we're done talking about potential issues as well as exploits, let's go ahead and talk about the starting fighters you can use in your gang, like champions as well as outcast hive scum. Now, before we go to the gang list, of course, let's talk about the other fighters you have available to you. First of all, you do have your Underhive Outcast champion. These guys cost 60 points apiece. They have 5-inch movement, 3+ weapon skill, 4+ ballistic skill. They have 3 strength, 3 toughness, 2 wounds, 4 initiative, 1 attack. They have 6 leadership, 7 cool, 8 willpower, as well as 8 intelligence. Now, when it comes to your Outcast champions, they actually are pretty versatile with their stats, and the roles within your gangs can be fulfilling a lot of different roles for your gang. Now, there is some negatives, of course, of playing an Outcast champion, and that is your Archetype. Your Archetype is very limited for the type of skills that you can take for your gang. For example, you have 5 different Archetypes you can take, which are Brawler, which gives you Brawn as your primary, with Frosty and Leadership as your secondary. Gunslinger, which makes shooting your primary, with agility and leadership as your secondary. You have Survivor, which gives you your ferocity skill as your primary, with combat and leadership as secondaries. You have Mastermind, which gives you cunning as primary, with leadership and savant as secondary. And then you have the Wyrd archetype, which makes you have your weird powers and disciplines be your primary, with cunning and leadership secondaries. So you are kind of limited in the type of skills you can take, but you know, them's the breaks about actually playing a Outcast champion. Now, there are some positives of playing Outcast champions. One, their equipment is only limited by the rarity value on the trading post. So if you wanted to get other equipment besides the house starting lists that you can buy from, your rarity value is only determined by, I think, rarity value 8 or lower was what it is. So you can pretty much take whatever you want on that case, which is really nice. And another positive about playing an Underhive Outcast champion is that you can take one champion for every 3 hive scum. So because of that, you have a lot more champions in your gang as the campaign develops. And of course, let's talk about the core of your gang, which is going to be your Underhive Outcast Hive Scum. Now, for these guys' stats, they cost 30 credits apiece. They have 5-inch movement, 4+ weapon skill and ballistic skill, 3 strength and toughness, 1 wound, 4+ initiative, 1 attack, and they have 8+ for leadership, cool, willpower, and intelligence. So unfortunately, the Outcast Hive Scum stats are very mediocre. But the positive is they're extremely cheap to field, only at 30 credits apiece, which is significantly cheaper than a lot of other gangs, as well as in some cases some juvies for some of the house lists that you can actually purchase from. So that part's kind of cool. Not to mention, your hive scum also count both as gangers as well as juvie level fighters in your gang as well. And that's really nice because for every 3 hive scum that you have in your gang, in your Outcast gang anyways, you can take 1 additional champion. Now, because their stats are so mediocre, that also means that the Outcast hive scum is very versatile because it can fill many different roles that you want with your gang. You can make them close combat fighters, you can make them shooters, you can give them psychic powers if you're able to do so through some kind of exploit. So that part is really nice about hive scum. They're very versatile and they can fulfill a lot of different jobs. Now, here's another unfortunate part. Unfortunately, when you create your Outcast gang, you cannot take a specialist right off the bat. You have to have that pop up later on as you gain experience. So you can't start off with any special weapons for your specialist as a campaign starts. But that's not so bad though, and the reason why is because the weapons they can purchase from the house lists, and at the same time you also have access to more champions than a normal gang does as well. And that pretty much makes it my take on the Outcast hive scum. Alright, so the very first list we're going to offer you guys is what I like to call the Out of the Dark and Into the Light list. This costs 1,400 credits. So first of all, you're taking Yageloth, the Master of Whispers, for 260 credits. This is the house agent that has access to all kinds of psychic powers for your House Delaque gang. Now, this guy is a Dramatis Personae. You're given the Wyrd archetype for obvious reasons. This fighter comes with mesh armor, as well as Psychoteric blade for their close combat weapon, a Respirator, as well as 2 Psychoteric Wyrms, so that way they can use those to actually extend the range of their psychic abilities. Now, this person also comes with Infiltrate skill, as well as Creature of Shadows, Master of Whispers, Non-Sanctioned Psyker for their special rules. Now, you give this fighter the Telepathy discipline, and you give them access to Mind Control, Terrify, Invisibility, Unbreakable, and Mental Assault. The reason why is because you want to create that Unbreakable will Psychoteric hive mind build for this list. After that, you have 2 Outcast champions. Outcast champion number 1 is going to cost 200 credits. This fighter's got the Wyrd archetype as well as mesh armor. They're packing a web gun, a last pistol, and they're also using the Pyromancy discipline, and you're given the Scouring ability, so that way this guy can fire 2 different template weapons in a single activation. After that, Outcast champion number 2 is going to cost you 135 credits. This fighter's got the Wyrd archetype. You're also given the mesh armor, as well as twin flechette pistols, as well as the Technomancy discipline overcharge. That way they can get strength 4 on those twin flechette pistols as well. After that, you will have 2 Outcast scum number 1 and 2. Both will cost 135 credits apiece. Both will have web pistols and shock staves. And then you have 2 more Outcast scum number 3 and 4. Both will cost you 70 credits apiece. Both are equipped with last guns with telescopic sights. After that, you'll have 2 vehicles on this one. Scum Racer 1's going to cost you 200 credits, and same thing with Scum Racer number 2. They're both equipped exactly the same with medium custom vehicles with transport beds, nitro burners for +1 movement, easy to turn over engines in case you got to restart your vehicle, as well as boarding ramps to give you +1 initiative for boarding actions. And this is what I like to call the Out of the Dark and Into the Light list. So let's talk about the gang review on this one. So this list is about closing the distance to the enemy and using psych abilities to really hurt your opponents. You will spam the Psychoteric hive mind build that we were talking about earlier, but using Yageloth's Unbreakable will psych ability will give your Outcast champions 4+ willpower. This will give you the ability to trigger your psychic powers 91% of the time for Yageloth as well as for your champions. Your fighters also have access to lots of templates blast weapons. This will help them with the lower ballistic skill of your fighters and hit multiple enemies at the same time, and this gang consists of 2 assault fire teams. heroes. Assault Fire Team number 1 consists of Yageloth, the Master of Shadow Whispers, Outcast Champion 1, Outcast Scum 1, Outcast Scum 3, and Scum Racer number 1. This fire's team job is pretty simple: close a distance with the enemy and either assault, dismounted, or board enemy vehicles. Yageloth spams their Unbreakable will ability on Outcast Champion number 1, giving this fighter 2 template attacks. One with the web gun, which would be really great for that, as well as one with the scouring. Now the scouring won't do as much in terms of damage, but hopefully will cause the enemy to scatter with the blaze special rule. Always attack with the web gun first, so that way you can web down enemies and hopefully put serious injuries on them, and then follow through with the scouring to scatter any survivors who might have survived. Now Yageloth, as well as Outcast Scum number 1, then follow through and take enemies out of action with coup de grace, or Outcast Scum number 3 can also protect the vehicle from enemy borders and to snipe at vulnerable targets as well. At the same time, Outcast Scum number 1 can also use their web pistol if they have to in order to take out enemy fighters. Now, Assault Fire Team number 2 consists of Outcast Champion number 2, Outcast Scum number 2, Outcast Scum number 4, and Scum Racer number 2. And of course, this whole team does pretty much exactly the same thing: close a distance with the enemy and either assault, dismounted, or board enemy vehicles. Outcast Scum number 2 attacks first using their web pistol to glue down enemies, and if you're lucky, you'll be able to mow down 2+ enemies while doing this. And meanwhile, Outcast Champion number 2 spams overcharge power on their flechette pistols, making them strength 4 in shooting and also in close combat, or they can charge forward and dispatch with enemies with coup de grace. And then finally, Outcast Scum number 4's job is to protect the vehicle from any borders and to snipe at vulnerable targets. And this is how you're going to use the Out of the Darkness and Into the Light list. Now, the next list I like to use is what's called the Spidery Sniper list, which is going to cost you 1,395 credits. Now, you're going to have an Outcast Leader. This character's going to have 345 credits. You're going to give him the Mastermind Archetype as well as the shooting stat line. They're going to be equipped with Armor, Undersuit, Mesh Armor for 4-up armor save, a Mastercrafted Long Rifle, Chameleon Cloak, so that way they have minus to hit against when shooting, and a Psychomancer's Harness to give you that +2 to movement, as well as Psychoteric Claws you use in close combat, and Infiltrate Special Rule. Add that you have 2 Outcast Champions, number 1 and 2, both equipped exactly the same at 255 credits. Both will have the Mastermind Archetype, both will have Mesh Armor as well as Mastercrafted Long Rifles. They have the Chameleon's Cloak for a -2 against getting hit against if they remain stationary, Psychomancer's Harness for +2 movement as well as Psychoteric Claws, and the Infiltrate Special Rule as well. And then you will have 4 Outcast Scum. All 4 cost exactly the same at 135 credits. All 4 will have Mesh Armor, Last Guns, Shock Staves, as well as being mounted on Wasters dirt bikes. So this entire gang is mounted and really, really fast. And that's what I like to call the Spidery Sniper list. So now that we're done talking about the list components, let's talk about the gang overview. Alright, this gang is designed to completely surround enemies and to catch them in a crossfire before you charge forward to finish them off in close combat. Everyone in this gang is mounted in one form or another and has a perfect combination of medium to long range shooting as well as close combat. You will spam the Infiltrate skill to position your leader and champions into advantageous position at the beginning of the battle using your Infiltrate rule, and then the rest of your fighters will charge forward on their Waster's dirt bike. Everyone in this list is at least movement 7, movement 8, or movement 9, and making it lightning fast as well. And this gang consists of 2 fire teams, 1 support fire team, and 1 assault fire team. Your support fire team will consist of your Outcast Leader as well as champions number 1 and 2. This fire team will deploy together using Infiltrate Special Rule and act as a stationary sniper team for the most part. Their Mastercrafted Long Rifles will give them the ability to engage enemies at medium to long range, and their Chameleon Cloaks will give them -2 to hit against penalty for enemies who try to shoot them, so long as they remain stationary. Now, if you do need to move, your Psychomancer's Harnesses will give you a +2 to your movement boost, which also allows you to climb up vertical surfaces very, very quickly as well. Not to mention, your Psychomancer Harnesses also come equipped with paired Psychomantic Claws, so that way not only can you shoot at long range, but you can also fight in close combat if you need to. Now, my suggestion to you is to shoot at your enemies and then charge forward to finish off your enemies off using those Psychomancer's Harnesses for that one. Now, your assault fire team consists of Outcast Scum number 1 through 4. This fire team job is pretty simple: move forward on their Wasters dirt bikes as quickly as possible. They do have Last Guns to engage enemies at further distances from medium to long range, and they have Shock Staves to exploit the Rabbi rule using their close combat attacks. And with their Wasters dirt bikes, they will have movement 8, which will help them to accomplish their mission, so them move up forward and take out anybody who is left alive. And this is what I like to call the Spidery Sniper list for House Delaque Outcast gangs. The last list we're going to use we like to call the Eldritch Horror list, which is going to cost you 1,395 credits. For this one, you're going to have a Piscean Spector, which is going to be a brute for your most Delac gangs, but this guy's going to be your leader. He's going to cost 205 credits. He's got the Brawler Archetype as well as Light Carapace Armor, paired Psychomantic Claws. He's got the Flight Special Rule as well as Psychoteric Mastery and Non-Sanctioned Psyker Special Rules as well. You got the Fearsome skill, the Bull Charge skill, give you +1 to your strength for your attacks and knockback, and it gives this guy the Telepathy discipline for the Unbreakable willpower, so that way you could use to create the Psychoteric hive mind. You'll then have 2 Outcast Champions. Champion number 1's going to cost you 175 credits. This person's got the Wyrd Archetype as well as Mesh Armor. They're packing a Flechette Pistol, a Shiver Sword, as well as a Telekinesis Discipline Force Shield. And then Outcast Champion number 2's going to cost you 195 credits. They got Wyrd Archetype, Mesh Armor, Flechette Pistol, as well as Serpent Fangs, and then the Telekinesis Discipline Force Shield as well. Then you will have 2 Outcast Scum, Scum number 1 and 2. Both will cost you 110 credits. Both will have Psychoteric Whispers upgrades. Both will have Mesh Armor, Stub Guns with Dum-Dum rounds, as well as Chain Swords, as well as the Biomancy Discipline, the Quickening, giving them +2 movement and +1 to the weapon skill and Ballista skill. You will then have 2 more Hive Scum, Outcast Scum number 3 and 4. Both will cost you 100 credits apiece. Both will have Psychoteric Whisper upgrades. Both will have Mesh Armor as well as Last Guns with Stub Guns with Dum-Dum rounds, as well as Technopancy Discipline Overcharge. And then finally you have a Scum Racer for 400 credits. This guy's operating a Rock Grinder with Rock Grinder Ram, weapons cache for ammo, buffs to ammo rolls, as well as twin-linked auto cannons. And now that we're done talking about the list of the Eldritch Horror list, let's talk about how this gang operates in the gang overview. Alright, so let's talk about the gang overview real fast. This list is about fighting defensively and using psychic powers to enhance your fighter's abilities. You will spam the Psychoteric Hive Mind by using the Piscean Spector's Unbreakable psychic ability, giving all your fighters 9 inches 6+ willpower, which means your ability will be able to trigger your power 72% of the time. This team consists of only 1 fire team, and your fire team, of course, your Outcast Champions, will spam the Force Shield, giving +2 armor saves to all of your fighters within 3 inches, giving you +3 armor save when combined with Mesh Armor for your fighters, or +2 armor save for your Piscean Spector. Now your champion is Telekinesis Discipline, will give them +1 strength and +1 damage to their melee attacks too, and when combined with Shiver Sword and Serpent's Fangs, this would be absolutely devastating. Now Outcast Scum number 1 and 2 will spam the Quickening, giving them movement 8, 3+ weapon skill, as well as 3+ Ballista skill. They're engaging enemies in close combat as well as shooting. You could also spam that Quickening ability as well, the Force Blast ability as well when you level up, so that way you can push enemies off of vehicles, terrain, etc. Now at the same time, Outcast Scum number 3 and 4 spam the Overcharge ability of the Last Guns, making their strength 4 shots. I highly suggest you purchase Hot Shot Last Packs as soon as possible to make your Last Gun strength 5 shooting attacks, and their Stub Guns with Dum-Dum rounds could also become strength 5 attacks as well, both in shooting and close combat. And finally, the entire gang fights from or steers nearby your Rock Grinder. The Scum Racer's job is to provide long-range fire with their twin-linked auto cannons. They can also ram enemy vehicles with their Rock Grinder ram, and the vehicle's ammo cache will help out with ammo rolls as well. Alright, so in conclusion, playing a House Outcast gangs is one of the coolest gangs you could possibly play in Necromunda. Outcast gangs have more access to fully customizable leaders with either Dramatis Personae or custom leaders you build, making some of the most amazing and interesting gangs that are available to play in this gaming system. Not to mention, Outcast gangs also have cheaper champions and fighters than normal House gangs, but at the same time, you have access to all the same weapons, war gear, brutes, and hanger-ons that a House gang automatically comes with. Meanwhile, there are no weapon and equipment restrictions from the house list either, so whatever the house list has available to you, you can use that to all of your fighters, regardless if it's a fighter specific gear. It can be taken by your entire gang as well. Now of course, as always, there is a drawback to playing a House Outcast gang, and that drawback comes in the form of the Balanced Bandwagon. So you'll always have to put up with the immature and hateful speech of Balanced Bandwagoneers, who will do things like cry out arguments of overpowered and game imbalance, instead of looking for creative solutions to solving their problems or just getting better at playing the game. They'd rather blame you than, reflect on their own performance and make adjustments accordingly. So keep that in mind if you decide to play a House Outcast gang. So that's good to do it for this week, guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is invaluable to us as always. Also check us on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest greatest hobby news related to this channel. That's good for this week, guys. We'll catch you guys next one. Peace out and stay classy.